The morning air in Chicago carried the sharp bite of early November, that particular cold that seeps through coat seams and settles in the bones. Gray clouds hung low over the city's south side, promising rain that would turn the streets slick and reflective by afternoon. Marie Chen pulled her worn navy jacket tighter as she stepped off the bus at West 31st Street. Her cleaning supply cart rattling behind her on uneven wheels that had seen better days. She was 34 years old, though the weight of the past 5 years had etched lines around her eyes that made her look older. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her hands, scrubbed clean but permanently stained from years of harsh chemicals, gripped the cart handle with quiet determination. This was her third job of the day: the apartment complex at dawn, the medical offices at mid-morning, and now this. Always this. The place everyone at Sunshine Cleaning Services whispered about in the break room but never discussed directly. The building stood at the end of a block of forgotten warehouses and shuttered storefronts, a 4-story brick structure that had once been a meatpacking plant. Now it served a different purpose entirely. No signs marked it. No business name adorned the heavy steel door, but everyone in the neighborhood knew. You didn't ask questions, you didn't make eye contact, you certainly didn't linger. Marie had been cleaning this building every Tuesday and Friday for 6 months. The money was triple her usual rate, paid in cash. No questions asked. Her supervisor, Mrs. Rodriguez, had pulled her aside when offering the assignment. You keep your head down. You do the work, you leave. Don't talk to anyone unless they talk to you first. Don't touch anything that isn't obviously trash. And Marie, the older woman's face had been grave. If they ever tell you not to come back, you don't argue. You just leave. Marie had needed the money too desperately to refuse. Her daughter's medical bills from the car accident 2 years ago still arrived monthly. Even though Sarah was gone, the insurance company had fought every claim. The funeral costs had drained her savings, and the small apartment she could barely afford was still full of her daughter's things, a museum of a life cut short at 16. She punched in the code at the side entrance. It changed weekly, texted to her phone every Monday night, and the heavy door clicked open. The interior was dimly lit, as always. The main floor had been converted into something resembling a legitimate freight company, with desks, filing cabinets, and even a few computers that hummed quietly in the corners. But Marie had been cleaning long enough to recognize a front operation. The desks were too clean, the papers too neatly stacked, the computers never showed signs of actual use. 2 men sat near the entrance, both in dark jeans and leather jackets despite the indoor heating. One was scrolling through his phone with the bored expression of someone waiting for something interesting to happen. The other watched Marie enter with the flat, assessing gaze she'd grown accustomed to, sizing her up, confirming she matched the description they'd been given, then dismissing her as irrelevant. "Morning," she said quietly, the way she always did. The phone scroller grunted. The watcher gave a barely perceptible nod. Marie wheeled her cart toward the freight elevator at the back of the room. The second floor housed what passed for offices. Actual offices where actual business of a decidedly unofficial nature was conducted. The third floor was living quarters for some of the men who worked here. She'd learned not to knock on those closed doors, to simply clean the common areas and bathrooms and leave the private rooms alone. But the fourth floor was different. That was where he stayed, the boss. She'd seen him exactly 4 times in 6 months, always at a distance, always surrounded by men who moved with the coiled tension of guard dogs. He was younger than she'd expected when she first glimpsed him, maybe early 40s, with dark hair graying at the temples and a face that might have been handsome if it wasn't set in permanent lines of cold authority. Vincent Castellano. She'd heard the name whispered, though never here, never in this building where speaking his name felt like an invitation to disaster. The elevator groaned as it climbed, cables creaking in the shaft. Marie checked her watch. 7:47 a.m. She liked arriving before most of the organization woke up, when the building was quieter, when she could work without navigating around people whose very presence radiated danger. The 4th floor hallway was carpeted, the only floor with carpet, in deep burgundy that muffled footsteps. Wall sconces provided warm lighting, expensive-looking fixtures that seemed out of place in what was supposed to be an old meatpacking plant. 3 doors lined each side of the hall, and at the far end, double doors marked the boss's private office and living quarters. Marie began her routine in the communal bathroom, scrubbing sinks that were already relatively clean, mopping floors that showed little sign of use. The men who worked here were meticulous in strange ways. Violence and chaos in their profession, but order in their personal spaces. It made her job easier, though no less unsettling. She was cleaning the hallway, her mop making rhythmic swishing sounds against the carpet's edge, when she heard it, a low rumbling growl that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. Marie froze, mop in hand, and slowly turned. The dog stood 15 feet away, having emerged silently from the direction of the double doors. He was massive, an English bulldog, but larger than any she'd seen, easily 70 pounds of muscle and wrinkled skin. His coat was brindle, dark stripes over tawny brown, and his face bore the characteristic pushed-in features of his breed, with a pronounced underbite that gave him a permanently fierce expression. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. Dark, intelligent, and currently fixed on her with unwavering intensity. The growl came again, deeper this time, vibrating through his barrel chest. Marie heard rapid footsteps on the stairs, someone running up from the third floor. A door burst open behind her, and suddenly 3 men were in the hallway, all of them tensing at the sight of her and the dog. "Don't move," one of them hissed, a tall man with a shaved head and a scar running through his left eyebrow. His hand had moved instinctively toward his waistband. "Jesus, how'd she get past Brutus?" another muttered, younger, with slicked back hair and a gold chain visible at his collar. The third man, older and calmer, held up a hand. "Nobody do anything stupid. The boss will have our heads if something happens to his dog." Marie's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her breathing steady. The dog, Brutus apparently, had begun moving toward her, his gait rolling and deliberate. The growl continued, a constant warning rumble that seemed to fill the hallway. Behind her, she heard the distinctive sound of someone chambering around. "I said don't move," Scar Eyebrow repeated, his voice tight with tension. But Marie wasn't looking at the men anymore. She was watching Brutus, reading the signals in his body language the way she'd been taught years ago, in another life, when she'd worked at the veterinary clinic and dreamed of becoming a vet tech, before the money ran out, before Sarah got sick the first time, before everything fell apart. The dog's ears were forward, not pinned back. His tail, though low, wasn't tucked. The growl was aggressive, yes, but it was also testing, establishing dominance, asking a question. "Are you a threat?" Brutus closed the distance between them, and Marie could see the men in her peripheral vision tensing, preparing for violence. The dog's massive head was level with her waist. He circled slightly, forcing her to turn with him, keeping eye contact. The growl never stopped, and then he lunged. One of the men shouted. Marie heard the metallic click of a safety being released, but she saw what they didn't. Brutus wasn't attacking. He was testing. His jaws clamped down on the sleeve of her jacket, not on flesh, and his eyes stayed locked on hers, watching for her reaction, waiting to see if she would panic, pull away, confirm that she was prey. Marie did something that made absolutely no sense to the armed men in the hallway. She smiled. It wasn't a big smile, not theatrical or fake, just a small, gentle upturning of her lips, the kind of expression you'd give a nervous child or a frightened animal. And then slowly, telegraphing every movement, she raised her free hand and placed it on top of Brutus's wrinkled head. The growl stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. "What the hell?" the younger man started, but the older one shushed him sharply. Marie's fingers worked gently through the folds of skin on Brutus's massive skull, finding the spots behind his ears, applying just the right amount of pressure. The dog's jaw loosened on her sleeve. His eyes, still watching her, had changed, the aggression replaced by curiosity, assessment, and something that might have been approval. "Good boy," Marie murmured, her voice low and calm. "You're just doing your job, aren't you? Protecting your territory. That's a good boy." Brutus's tail moved, just once. A slight wag, but unmistakable. Marie slowly crouched down, bringing herself closer to the dog's level, her hand never leaving his head. With her other hand, she gently worked her sleeve free from his mouth. The fabric was damp with saliva, but not torn. No teeth had broken through. "You're not really aggressive, are you?" she said softly, now scratching under his chin, finding the spot that made his back leg start to twitch. "Just protective, just doing what you're supposed to do." Brutus leaned into her touch, his massive body relaxing, and then, to the absolute shock of everyone watching, he sat down and rested his considerable weight against her legs, nearly knocking her over. Marie laughed, actually laughed, a sound so unexpected in this place that it seemed to echo strangely in the hallway. "Well," she said, looking up at the 3 men who stood frozen in various states of disbelief, "I think we're friends now." The door at the end of the hall, the double doors to the boss's quarters, opened with a soft click that somehow cut through the moment like a gunshot. Vincent Castellanos stood in the doorway, wearing black slacks and a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. His dark eyes moved from his men to the dog to the cleaning woman who was now sitting on his hallway floor, petting his notoriously aggressive bulldog like he was a house pet. "Someone," he said, his voice quiet but carrying absolute authority, "want to explain what's happening in my hallway?" The 3 men started talking at once, their words tumbling over each other. The older one's explanation was the clearest. "Boss, she came up to clean like usual. Brutus came out, he went for her. We were about to intervene, but she petted him," the younger one finished, his voice disbelieving. "She just smiled and petted him, and he stopped." Vincent Castellanos' gaze fixed on Marie. She looked back at him steadily, still scratching behind Brutus's ears, the dog's eyes now half closed in contentment. "What's your name?" the boss asked. "Marie Chen." "How long have you been cleaning here?" "Marie Chen." 6 months, every Tuesday and Friday." "And nobody told you about my dog?" "No, sir, but I used to work with animals. He wasn't actually trying to hurt me. He was just checking if I belonged here." Something shifted in Vincent Castellanos' expression. Not a smile exactly, but a slight easing of the hard lines around his mouth. He looked at Brutus, who had now rolled onto his back, exposing his belly to Marie in the ultimate sign of trust and submission. "Brutus has bitten 3 people in the last year," the boss said, "sent 2 to the hospital. And you're telling me he was just checking?" Marie nodded. "Dogs don't bite without reason. They warn first." "He warned me with the growl. When I didn't react with fear or aggression, he tested me with my sleeve. When I still didn't panic, he accepted me." She paused, then added quietly, "He's a good dog. Well-trained. He's doing exactly what you trained him to do." Vincent Castellano studied her for a long moment, and Marie had the distinct impression she was being assessed in a way that had nothing to do with her cleaning abilities, and everything to do with something else entirely, something these men valued far more than a clean floor. "Leave the cart," he finally said. "Marco, get her a coffee. Marie Chen, I'd like to speak with you in my office." The three men in the hallway exchanged glances. The older one, Marco apparently, nodded and headed for the stairs. The younger two remained, clearly uncertain whether they should follow or stay. Marie slowly stood up, giving Brutus one final scratch. The dog remained on his back for a moment, then rolled to his feet and immediately moved to stand beside his owner, though his eyes kept returning to Marie. "Is that a request or an order?" Marie asked, surprising herself with the question. The corner of Vincent Castellano's mouth actually did turn up this time. "In this building, Marie Chen, they're the same thing, but you're not in trouble. Consider yourself interesting, and I don't find many people interesting." He turned and walked back through the double doors, leaving them open. An invitation, or maybe a summons. Brutus looked back at Marie once more, then followed his owner inside. Marie took a breath, feeling the adrenaline that had sustained her through the last 5 minutes beginning to fade, leaving her hands trembling slightly. She'd just petted a dangerous dog in a dangerous place surrounded by dangerous people, and instead of being thrown out, or worse, she was being invited to coffee with the boss. She followed them through the double doors into whatever came next, knowing with absolute certainty that nothing about her Tuesday and Friday mornings would ever be the same again. The interior of Vincent Castellano's private quarters was nothing like Marie had imagined. She'd expected dark leather, heavy curtains, perhaps the stereotypical trappings of power and intimidation she'd seen in movies. Instead, the space was surprisingly understated. Hardwood floors in honey-toned oak, large windows that overlooked the industrial landscape of South Chicago, and furniture that spoke of quality rather than ostentation. A leather sofa in worn cognac brown sat against one wall, flanked by bookshelves filled with actual books, their spines creased from reading. A desk occupied the space near the windows, its surface organized but lived in, with papers weighted down by a smooth river stone, and a coffee mug bearing the faded logo of the Chicago Bears. Brutus had already claimed his spot on a large dog bed near the sofa, circling 3 times before settling with a contented grunt, though his eyes remained fixed on Marie as she stood uncertainly just inside the doorway. Vincent gestured to one of 2 chairs facing his desk. "Sit. Marco will be up with coffee in a minute." He moved behind the desk but didn't sit immediately, instead standing with his hands in his pockets, studying her with the same assessing gaze she'd felt in the hallway. "You're not afraid?" It wasn't a question, but Marie answered anyway. "I was afraid. I just didn't show it." "Why not?" "Because fear makes everything worse. With animals, with people, with situations you can't control." She paused, then added, "My daughter taught me that." Something flickered across Vincent's face, a momentary softening that disappeared so quickly Marie almost thought she'd imagined it. "You have a daughter?" "Had." The word came out flat, final. Marie didn't elaborate, and Vincent didn't push, though she saw him absorb the information, file it away. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Marco entered carrying a tray with 3 cups of coffee and a small plate of biscotti. He set it on the desk with practiced efficiency, his movements careful and precise. The older man's eyes flicked to Marie, assessing her again in this new context. Sitting in the boss's office, being served coffee like a guest, rather than an employee. "Thank you, Marco," Vincent said, dismissing him with a nod. When the door closed, Vincent poured 2 cups, sliding one across the desk to Marie. She wrapped her hands around it, grateful for the warmth. The coffee was good, far better than the instant powder she made in her apartment's cramped kitchenette each morning. "Tell me about working with animals," Vincent said, settling into his chair. It was an expensive office chair, the kind designed for long hours, but it creaked slightly as he leaned back, a familiar sound that suggested years of use. Marie took a sip of coffee, buying herself a moment. How much should she share? How much did this man, this stranger who commanded fear and loyalty in equal measure, actually want to know? "I worked at a veterinary clinic when I was younger," she began. "Started when I was 19, just answering phones and cleaning kennels. But I was good with the difficult animals, the ones who came in scared or aggressive, the ones who'd been mistreated. Dr. Patterson, the vet who owned the clinic, he taught me how to read them, how to understand what they're really saying beneath the obvious signals. And what was my dog saying? That he's loyal, that he takes his job seriously, that he's been trained to protect, and he's good at it." Marie met Vincent's gaze directly. "But also that he's lonely. Dogs like Brutus, they're social animals. They need purpose, yes, but they also need connection. He was testing me, but he was also hoping I'd pass the test." Vincent's expression remained neutral, but his fingers drummed once against the armrest of his chair, a small tell that suggested she'd struck close to something true. "You don't work at the clinic anymore." "No, I couldn't afford to keep working there once my daughter got sick the first time. She was 12, leukemia." Marie's voice remained steady, the way it always did when she talked about Sarah. She'd learned to build walls around the grief, to present the facts without letting the emotions bleed through. "She went into remission for 2 years. The clinic didn't offer health insurance, and I needed benefits. Stability, so I started cleaning. Better pay, insurance through the company, flexible hours so I could be there for her appointments. But she's not here now. Car accident 2 years ago. She was 16, had just gotten her license. She'd been cancer-free for 18 months. Marie set her coffee cup down carefully on the desk. Drunk driver ran a red light at Ashland and Division. Sarah died on impact. The driver walked away with a broken arm. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. Vincent didn't offer empty condolences or meaningless platitudes. He simply nodded, acknowledging the weight of what she'd shared. Behind him, through the windows, the November sky had darkened further, and the first drops of the promised rain began streaking the glass. The bills didn't die with her, Marie continued, surprising herself with the urge to explain, to fill the quiet with truth. The insurance company fought everything, claimed the accident was her fault, that she was an inexperienced driver, that their client had the right of way despite the witnesses saying otherwise. The funeral, the remaining medical bills, the lawyer fees to fight the insurance company. I lost everything. My apartment, my savings, most of my possessions. I moved into a studio in Pilsen, got extra shifts wherever I could find them, and then Mrs. Rodriguez offered me this job. Did she tell you what we do here? She didn't have to. Everyone knows. They just don't say it out loud. Vincent's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Smart woman, Mrs. Rodriguez. She's been placing cleaners here for 3 years. Most of them last a few weeks before they quit, or we let them go. You're the first one who's made it past 6 months. Why? You don't ask questions, you don't gossip, you do your work and leave. And he glanced at Brutus, who had begun snoring softly. Apparently, you're good with difficult personalities. Marie followed his gaze to the dog. He's not difficult. He's just doing what he's supposed to do. Dogs are honest that way. They don't pretend to be something they're not. Unlike people. Unlike most people. Vincent stood and walked to the windows, his back to her now, watching the rain intensify against the glass. My father gave me Brutus 3 years ago, just before he died. Lung cancer. He'd bred bulldogs his whole life. Good ones, champion lines, the whole thing. But Brutus was special. Too big for shows, too aggressive for most families, but perfect for what my father thought I needed. He paused, his reflection visible in the rain-streaked window. A companion who wouldn't judge, wouldn't betray, wouldn't leave unless I pushed him away. Marie heard the layers beneath the words, the loneliness, the burden of a life where trust was currency and betrayal was punishable by violence. She thought of the men in the hallway, the way they'd moved toward their weapons, the casual readiness for harm. And she thought of this man, standing in his surprisingly ordinary office, talking about his father and his dog with a vulnerability that felt dangerous to witness. Why are you telling me this? She asked quietly. Vincent turned from the window. Because in 6 months, you're the first person who's walked into this building and treated my dog like a dog instead of a weapon. And I'm curious what kind of person does that without thinking about the consequences. Maybe I did think about the consequences. Maybe I just decided petting your dog was less dangerous than panicking. Or maybe Vincent returned to his chair, leaning forward now, his elbows on the desk. You're someone who's lost enough that fear doesn't hold the same weight anymore. The observation hit closer to home than Marie wanted to admit. She picked up her coffee cup again, using it as a shield. What do you want from me, Mr. Castellano? Vincent, if you're going to keep coming here, we should dispense with formalities. He picked up a biscotti, broke it in half, and offered a piece to Marie. She took it, the gesture oddly domestic in the context of their surroundings. I want you to keep cleaning, but I also want you to help with Brutus. Help how? He's getting older, 7 years now. He's developed some aggression issues that are becoming problematic. He's bitten 3 people in the last year. All of them deserved it for the record, but still. I need someone who understands him, who can work with him, maybe train him to be less reactive. Vincent's expression was serious now, businesslike. I'll pay you double your current rate. You'd come 3 times a week instead of 2. You'd still clean, but you'd also spend time with Brutus. Exercise him, work on his behavior, whatever you think he needs. Marie's mind raced through the implications. More money meant getting ahead of her bills, maybe even saving something, but it also meant deeper involvement with this world, with these people, with situations that could turn dangerous without warning. She thought of the men in the hallway, their hands moving toward weapons, their willingness to use violence as a first resort rather than a last one. I'm not a professional trainer, she said. I just worked at a clinic. I'm not qualified to. You got my dog to trust you in 5 minutes. That's more qualified than anyone else I know. Vincent's tone was final, decided. Besides, you need the money, and I need someone I can trust around Brutus who won't make him worse. It's a practical arrangement, and if I say no, then you say no. You keep your current schedule, your current pay, and we never speak of this again. But I don't think you're going to say no, Marie Chen. He was right, and they both knew it. The money was too good, too necessary. But more than that, and Marie felt almost ashamed to admit it even to herself. She'd felt something when she was petting Brutus. A connection, a purpose beyond just surviving from paycheck to paycheck. For the first time in 2 years, something had sparked in her chest that felt like interest, like engagement with the world beyond her grief. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, she said. 7 a.m., 3 hours each day. I clean for 2 hours, work with Brutus for 1. Done. Vincent extended his hand across the desk. Marie shook it. His grip was firm but not crushing, his hand warm and dry. When she pulled back, she noticed a thin scar running across his knuckles, an old injury, long-healed, the kind that came from connecting with something hard and unforgiving. One rule, Vincent added as Marie stood to leave. What happens in this building What you see, what you hear, it stays here. You don't talk about it. Not to Mrs. Rodriguez, not to your friends, not to anyone. Understood? I don't have friends, Marie said simply, and Mrs. Rodriguez knows better than to ask. But yes, understood. Vincent nodded, satisfied. Marco will see you out. Come Monday at 7. Brutus will be expecting you. As if summoned by his name, the bulldog lifted his massive head from his bed, his tail beginning to wag when he saw Marie moving toward the door. She paused, crouched down, and gave him one more scratch behind the ears. See you Monday, boy. Brutus's tail wagged harder, his whole rear end wiggling with enthusiasm. Marco was waiting in the hallway, his expression carefully neutral. He walked her to the elevator in silence, pressed the button, and waited with her until the doors opened. Just before she stepped inside, he spoke. You're either very brave or very foolish. Marie looked at the older man, seeing the concern beneath his stoic exterior. Maybe both. The boss doesn't let many people close. The last person he trusted. Marco stopped himself, shaking his head. Just be careful. This world has rules, but they're not the rules you're used to. The elevator doors closed before Marie could respond, leaving her with Marco's warning echoing in her mind as the ancient machinery carried her down to the ground floor. Outside, the rain had intensified, drumming against the pavement in sheets that turned the streets into rivers. Marie pulled her jacket hood up and began the 3-block walk to the bus stop, her cleaning cart rattling behind her, water spraying up from the wheels. Her phone buzzed, a text from Mrs. Rodriguez asking if everything was okay, if she'd finished the job. Marie typed back a simple yes and pocketed the phone. Everything was okay, or at least, that's what she told herself. But as the bus carried her across the city toward her next job, Marie couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just stepped across a threshold, that the world she'd been merely surviving in had shifted somehow, become more complex, more dangerous, and possibly, impossibly, more alive than it had been in 2 years. She thought of Brutus's trusting eyes, of Vincent's quiet vulnerability when he spoke about his father, of Marco's warning. She thought of the men in the hallway, their readiness for violence, their suspicion of her presence, and she thought of her empty apartment waiting for her at the end of the day, with its walls still covered in Sarah's drawings, its closet still holding clothes that would never be worn again, its silence that pressed down like a physical weight. At least now, 3 days a week, there would be a dog to pet, a purpose to fulfill, and enough money to maybe, finally, begin to breathe again. The rain continued as the bus crossed into the north side, and Marie pressed her forehead against the cold window, watching the city blur past, wondering what Monday morning would bring, and whether she'd just made the best decision of her life or the most dangerous one. Monday morning arrived with the kind of bitter cold that turned breath into clouds and made the city feel smaller, hunched against the wind. Marie stood outside the building at 6:55 a.m., her new schedule beginning earlier than her old routine. The streets were still dark, the sun not yet cresting the horizon, and the orange glow of streetlights reflected off patches of ice that had formed overnight on the sidewalk. She punched in the code. It had changed again as it did every week, and entered the building. The main floor was quieter than usual, with only one man present, someone she didn't recognize. He was younger, maybe mid-20s, with nervous energy that showed in the way his leg bounced as he sat scrolling through his phone. He looked up when she entered, his eyes widening slightly. "You're the cleaner," he said, more statement than question. "Marie?" she replied, moving toward the elevator with her cart. "I heard about you, about what happened with Brutus." The young man stood, pocketing his phone. "I'm Tommy. Started last week. They told me if I see you, I should let you through. No questions." Marie nodded her acknowledgement and continued to the elevator. As the doors closed, she caught Tommy staring after her with an expression of confused curiosity, as if he couldn't quite figure out how a cleaning woman had earned special status in a place where status was everything. The 4th floor was silent when she arrived. Marie left her cart in the hallway and knocked softly on the double doors, not wanting to presume entry despite Vincent's instructions. She heard movement inside, and the unmistakable sound of Brutus's excited snorting, the breed's characteristic breathing that always sounded like a small engine struggling to start. The door opened. Vincent stood there in athletic pants and a gray sweatshirt, his hair still damp from a shower. He looked different in casual clothes, younger, less intimidating, though his eyes still carried that assessing quality that seemed to be his default expression. "Punctual," he observed, stepping aside to let her in. "I appreciate that." Brutus bounded forward, his entire rear end wagging with such enthusiasm that his whole body curved with each movement. Marie crouched immediately, letting the dog press his wrinkled face against her hands, his breath warm and slightly fishy, a bulldog characteristic she remembered from the clinic. "Someone missed you," Vincent said, a note of amusement in his voice. "He's been sitting by the door since 6:30. Marie laughed, scratching under Brutus's chin while the dog made contented groaning sounds. "Did you, boy? Did you wait for me? Coffee?" Vincent asked, already moving toward a small kitchen area Marie hadn't noticed during her first visit. It was tucked into an alcove, a counter with a high-end espresso machine, a small refrigerator, and cabinets that probably held more than the instant ramen and canned soup that filled Marie's own kitchen. "Please," Marie said, standing as Brutus continued to lean against her legs, nearly knocking her off balance with his enthusiasm. Vincent prepared 2 cups, with the practiced efficiency, of someone who'd made thousands of coffees in this exact space. I thought we'd start with a walk. There's a route I take him on most mornings, through the industrial district. Not many people around. You can assess his behavior in different environments, see what triggers his aggression. Has he always been reactive, or is this recent? Progressive. Started about a year ago, gotten worse in the last 6 months. Vincent handed her a cup. The coffee was dark and strong, exactly how Marie preferred it. My father used to walk him twice a day. After he died, that responsibility fell to whoever was available. Different people, different times, no consistency. I think Brutus started seeing everyone except me as a potential threat. Marie nodded, processing this information while sipping her coffee. Dogs need routine. They need to know what's expected and who's safe. If his world became unpredictable after your father died, he would have become defensive to protect himself and you. Can you fix it? I can try, but it'll take time, and it'll require consistency. Same person, same times, same approach. And Marie hesitated, then continued, he needs to see you trust the people around him. If you're tense or suspicious around someone, he'll mirror that. Dogs are emotional sponges, especially protective breeds. Something shifted in Vincent's expression, a flicker of discomfort at the implication that his own behavior might be contributing to the problem. But he didn't argue, just nodded slowly. When do we start? Right now. 20 minutes later, they were walking through the empty streets of the industrial district. Brutus, on a thick leather leash, held loosely in Marie's hand. Vincent walked beside her, silent but attentive, watching how she interacted with the dog. The morning was still dark, the sky just beginning to lighten at the edges, turning from black to deep purple. Brutus pulled occasionally, his nose working overtime to process all the scents of the urban landscape. Oil, rust, garbage, the faint smell of the Chicago River a few blocks away. But each time he pulled, Marie stopped walking. She didn't yank the leash or scold him, just stood still and waited. After a few seconds, Brutus would look back at her and she'd resume walking, praising him softly. You're not correcting him, Vincent observed after the 5th time this happened. I am correcting him, just not with force. When he pulls the thing he wants, forward movement stops. When he checks in with me, he gets what he wants. It's self-correcting. Eventually, he'll learn that staying connected to me is more rewarding than pulling. They walked in silence for another block. A garbage truck rumbled past, its brakes squealing, and Brutus tensed immediately, his hackles rising slightly. Marie felt the tension travel through the leash, but she didn't tighten her grip, didn't transmit her own anxiety back to him. Instead, she kept walking at the same pace, her voice calm and steady. You're okay, boy. Just a truck. Nothing to worry about. Brutus glanced up at her, then at Vincent, seeking confirmation. When both humans remained calm, the dog's hackles lowered, and he continued walking, though he kept one eye on the truck as it disappeared around a corner. He looks to you for cues, Marie explained. If I'd tensed up, he would have escalated, but if I stay calm, he learns that the scary thing isn't actually a threat. You make it sound simple. The mechanics are simple. The consistency is hard. Marie paused at an intersection, having Brutus sit before they crossed, even though no cars were coming. The dog sat immediately, his eyes fixed on her face, waiting for the next instruction. Good boy, she murmured, and they crossed together. They walked for 40 minutes, covering roughly 2 miles through the quiet industrial maze of South Chicago. By the time they returned to the building, the sun had risen fully, turning the sky a pale winter blue, and Brutus was panting happily, his tongue lolling out the side of his mouth. Back in Vincent's quarters, Marie filled a water bowl while Brutus drank noisily, spraying water across the hardwood floor. Vincent didn't seem to mind, just tossed a towel over the puddles with the resignation of someone long accustomed to living with a messy dog. I have a meeting in an hour, Vincent said, checking his watch. You're welcome to stay and work with him here, or you can start your cleaning routine. Your choice. Marie glanced at Brutus, who had collapsed on his bed with a satisfied grunt, already half asleep from the exercise. I'll clean today. Let him rest. Wednesday, I'll do some basic training exercises. Sit, stay, recall, that sort of thing. Friday, we'll do another walk and see if his pulling has improved. You have a plan. Always have a plan. That's what Dr. Patterson used to say. Animals respond to structure. Vincent walked her to the door, Brutus not even lifting his head from his bed, a stark contrast to the aggressive animal who'd confronted her just days ago. Marie, Vincent said as she reached for the handle. Thank you. I know this is outside your usual job description. So is earning enough to actually save money, Marie replied with a small smile. Besides, I like him. He's honest. What you see is what you get. That's a rare quality. In dogs or in people? Both. Marie spent the next 2 hours cleaning with a meticulousness that had become second nature. The 4th-floor bathrooms, the hallway, the common area. She worked methodically, her mind half on the tasks and half on Brutus, replaying the walk, noting his triggers, planning Wednesday's training session. She was finishing the hallway when the elevator doors opened and 3 men stepped out, their voices loud and argumentative. Marie recognized one, Marco, the older man who'd warned her to be careful. The other 2 were unfamiliar, both wearing expensive suits that seemed out of place in the industrial building. Their conversation stopped abruptly when they saw her. Marco's expression tightened, a warning signal Marie couldn't quite interpret. One of the suited men, tall, with silver hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite, stared at her with open hostility. Who's this? Granite Face demanded, looking at Marco. The cleaner. She's been cleared by Vincent. Since when do cleaners get access to the private floor? Since Vincent says so, Marco replied, his tone careful, but firm. You want to question his decisions? Take it up with him. The tension in the hallway thickened. Marie kept her eyes down, focused on wringing out her mop, every instinct telling her to become invisible, to be nothing more than the furniture. But Granite Face wasn't satisfied. Look at me when I'm talking about you, he snapped. Marie looked up slowly, meeting his gaze with the same neutral expression she'd perfected over months of navigating dangerous spaces. I'm just finishing up. I'll be out of your way in 5 minutes. You'll be out of my way now. Sal, the third man interjected, younger than Granite Face with a scar that ran from his ear to his jawline. Leave it. Vincent's expecting us. But Sal wasn't backing down. He stepped closer to Marie, deliberately invading her space, using his size to intimidate. I don't like strangers on this floor. I don't care what Vincent says. You could be anyone. Law enforcement. A rival. Wearing a wire. The double doors opened. Vincent emerged, Brutus at his side, and the dog's demeanor changed instantly. Gone was the relaxed, happy animal from the walk. His body went rigid, his eyes fixed on Sal, and a low growl rumbled from his chest, deeper and more menacing than the warning growl Marie had heard during their first encounter. Is there a problem? Vincent asked, his voice quiet, but carrying absolute authority. Sal stepped back from Marie immediately, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Just being cautious, Vincent. You can't be too careful these days. Marie works for me. She's been thoroughly vetted, and Brutus trusts her, which is more than I can say for most people. Vincent's eyes moved to Marie. Are you all right? Fine, Marie said simply, though her heart was hammering. Just finishing up. Take your time. Gentlemen, Vincent gestured toward his office. Let's talk inside. The three men filed past, Sal avoiding eye contact with Marie now, the fight gone out of him. But as Marco passed, he paused, his voice low enough that only Marie could hear. That man is dangerous. Vincent protects his people, but he can't be everywhere. Watch yourself. Then they were gone, the double doors closing behind them, and Marie was alone in the hallway with her mop and cart and the lingering adrenaline of the confrontation. She finished cleaning on autopilot, her hands shaking slightly as she packed up her supplies. Wednesday couldn't come fast enough, not because she was eager to work with Brutus again, though she was, but because she needed to process what had just happened, needed to understand the dynamics of this world she'd stepped into more deeply than she'd intended. The next 2 days passed in their usual blur of work: the apartment complex, the medical offices, a new client Mrs. Rodriguez had assigned her. But Marie's mind kept returning to the 4th floor, to Brutus's protective growl, to Vincent's quiet assertion that she was under his protection, to Marco's warning. Wednesday morning arrived cold and clear. Marie entered the building at 7 a.m. sharp, and this time Tommy at the front desk actually smiled at her, a shy expression that made him look even younger than his years. Morning, Marie. Vincent said to tell you he's got back-to-back meetings today, but Brutus is ready for you. Marie nodded and headed up, finding the double doors unlocked and slightly ajar. She entered to find Brutus waiting exactly where he'd been on Monday, by the door, his whole body wiggling with excitement at her arrival. Vincent emerged from the bedroom area, already dressed in a dark suit, his phone pressed to his ear. He covered the mouthpiece. Training equipment is in the closet. Leash, treats, toys. Take whatever you need. I'll be done by 9 if you want to update me. Marie gave him a thumbs up, not wanting to interrupt his call, and gathered Brutus's supplies. The dog followed her every movement, his eyes bright with anticipation. She'd brought a few things of her own: a clicker she'd found at a pet store during her lunch break, a pouch for treats, a notebook to track progress. They spent the next hour in Vincent's office space, working on basics: sit, stay, come, release. Brutus knew all the commands already. His father had trained him well, but he'd become sloppy without consistent practice. Marie worked patiently, rewarding every correct response with a small treat and enthusiastic praise, ignoring mistakes rather than punishing them. The dog was smart, picking up on the renewed structure immediately. By the end of the session, he was sitting on command with just a hand signal, staying for 30 seconds while Marie walked across the room, and coming when called with genuine enthusiasm. Good boy, Marie said, kneeling to give him a full-body scratch that had his back leg thumping against the floor. You're such a good boy, Brutus. Your dad would be proud. She looked up to find Vincent standing in the bedroom doorway, his phone call evidently finished, watching them with an expression she couldn't quite read. He hasn't been that responsive in months, Vincent said quietly. He just needed someone to be consistent with him. Dogs thrive on routine and clear communication. Marie stood, brushing dog hair off her pants. He's a good dog, Vincent. Really good. The aggression issues aren't about him being bad, they're about him being confused and scared. Scared? Brutus? Yes. When his world became unpredictable after your father died, when different people started handling him without consistency, he lost his sense of security. Aggression is often fear in disguise. It's a defense mechanism. Marie paused, choosing her next words carefully. He's not just protecting you. He's protecting himself from a world that stopped making sense. Vincent was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving to Brutus, who had settled at Marie's feet, content and relaxed. My father used to say that Brutus was the best judge of character he'd ever met, that dogs can sense things about people that we miss. He was right. Dogs read body language, energy, intention, All the things we try to hide or fake, they see through the performance to what's underneath. And what does Brutus see in you? Marie met Vincent's eyes, understanding that the question was about more than just the dog. Someone who's been broken and is still standing. Someone who understands that survival isn't the same as living, but it's a start. She gathered her cleaning supplies. I should get to work. Same time Friday. Same time Friday, Vincent confirmed. And Marie, about what happened Monday with Sal. He was out of line. It won't happen again. Marco already warned me he was dangerous. Marco's right, but you're under my protection while you're in this building. Nobody touches you, threatens you, or even looks at you wrong. That's not a request or a promise. It's a fact. Marie nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The intensity of Vincent's statement, the absoluteness of it, stirred something complicated in her chest. Gratitude mixed with fear, safety intertwined with the awareness that such protection came with its own price, its own expectations. She cleaned for the next 2 hours, her mind turning over the morning's training session, the progress Brutus had made, the way Vincent had watched them with something that looked almost like longing, as if he envied the simplicity of the connection between woman and dog. Friday's session followed the same pattern. A walk, training exercises, cleaning. But this time Vincent joined them for the walk, and Marie noticed how Brutus kept checking in with both of them, his head swiveling back and forth, making sure both his people were safe and accounted for. The dog's pulling had already decreased significantly, and when they encountered another person, a jogger running past in the early morning darkness, Brutus barely reacted, just watched with mild interest instead of aggression. The improvement is remarkable, Vincent said as they walked. 3 sessions and he's like a different dog. He's not different. He's just secure again. He knows what's expected, who's safe, what the routine is. That's all any of us really need. They walked in companionable silence for a while, their breath misting in the cold air, the city slowly waking around them. Marie felt something loosening in her chest, some knot of tension she'd been carrying for so long she'd forgotten it was there. For these early morning hours, 3 times a week, she wasn't just surviving, she was engaged, purposeful, connected to something beyond her grief and her bills and her empty apartment. Can I ask you something personal? Vincent said suddenly. You can ask. I might not answer. Do you ever think about what comes next? After all this, the bills, the survival, the getting by? Marie considered the question seriously. No, she admitted. For a long time, I couldn't see past the next week, the next day, sometimes the next hour. I'm still not great at looking forward, but she glanced down at Brutus, trotting happily between them. This helps, having something to look forward to, even if it's just walking a dog 3 times a week. You're good at this, working with animals. Have you ever thought about going back to it? Really back to it? Not just as a side job? I can't afford vet tech school. I looked into it once after Sarah, after everything. But the programs are expensive, and I'd have to cut my hours to attend classes, and the math just doesn't work. Vincent was quiet for the rest of the walk, but Marie could see his mind working, processing, planning something she couldn't quite identify. When they returned to the building, Marco was waiting in the hallway outside Vincent's quarters, his expression grave. Boss, we need to talk. Now. Vincent glanced at Marie. Go ahead and work with Brutus. I'll be back shortly. But shortly turned into an hour, and Marie could hear raised voices through the doors. Not Vincent's. He remained calm, but others clearly agitated about something. She worked with Brutus on impulse control, having him wait while she placed treats on the floor, only allowing him to eat them on her command. The dog was surprisingly patient, his eyes fixed on her face rather than the food, waiting for permission. When the door finally opened, Marco emerged first, followed by 2 men Marie didn't recognize, both looking angry. Then Vincent, his expression neutral but his jaw tight with tension. And finally, Sal, granite face from Monday, whose eyes landed on Marie with undisguised hostility. This is a mistake, Vincent, Sal said loudly. You're making decisions based on sentiment instead of strategy. It's going to get people hurt. The decision is made, Vincent replied, his voice carrying absolute finality. You don't have to like it, you just have to accept it. Sal's gaze moved to Marie again, then to Brutus, sitting calmly at her feet. You've gotten soft. First the dog, now the cleaner. Next thing, you'll be running a charity instead of a business. The air in the hallway went electric with tension. Marco's hand moved slightly toward his waistband. The 2 unknown men shifted their weight, ready for violence. But it was Brutus who reacted first. The dog stood, placing himself directly between Sal and Marie, his body language completely different from the friendly animal of moments before. This was the protective guardian, the loyal defender, every muscle coiled and ready. He didn't growl, didn't bark, just stood there, immovable, his message absolutely clear. You'll have to go through me first. Vincent's lips curved into something that might have been a smile if it had reached his eyes. Looks like Brutus has made his position clear. I suggest you respect it, Sal. The dog's judgment has always been excellent. Sal stared at Brutus, then at Marie, then at Vincent. Whatever he saw in Vincent's expression made him step back, hands raised. Fine, your call, boss. I just hope you don't regret it. He pushed past toward the elevator, the other men following, leaving Marco and Vincent standing with Marie and Brutus in the hallway. Marie's hands were shaking. She pressed them against her thighs, not wanting anyone to see. Brutus leaned against her legs, sensing her distress, offering his solid warmth as comfort. "I'm sorry you had to see that," Vincent said quietly. "Internal disagreements, they happen." "What did he mean about me?" Marie asked, surprised by her own boldness. "What decision did you make?" Vincent and Marco exchanged a look. Marco shook his head slightly, a warning, but Vincent ignored it. "I'm restructuring some operations, making changes that certain people don't like because it affects their income. Sal implied that my judgment is compromised, that working with you, trusting you, is evidence that I've gone soft." Vincent's eyes met hers directly. "He's wrong. You're the most competent person I've hired in years, and Brutus's response to you confirms what I already knew. You belong here." The words should have been comforting, but Marie felt them settle on her shoulders like weight. Belonging here meant something different than belonging anywhere else. It meant acceptance into a world where disagreements were settled with threats, where trust was currency, and where a cleaning woman could become a pawn in power struggles she didn't fully understand. "I should go," Marie said quietly. "I've stayed longer than my 3 hours. I'll walk you down," Marco offered. And this time Vincent didn't object. In the elevator, Marco was silent until they were halfway to the ground floor. "Then, you handled that well, staying calm, not reacting. Brutus protected you because you projected confidence even though you were scared." "I was terrified," Marie admitted, "but you didn't show it. That's what matters in this world. Perception is reality." The elevator doors opened. Marco held them, keeping them from closing. Vincent meant what he said. "You're under his protection now. But that protection, it comes with expectations, loyalty, discretion. Never repeat what you see or hear here. Never question his decisions in front of others. Can you do that?" Marie thought about her empty apartment, her endless bills, her life that had become nothing but survival. She thought about Brutus's trusting eyes, about the morning walks through quiet streets, about having something to look forward to 3 times a week. She thought about Vincent's quiet vulnerability when he talked about his father, about the way he'd said she belonged here. "Yes," she said, "I can do that." Marco nodded, satisfied, and released the elevator doors. "See you Monday, Marie. Stay safe." The doors closed, and Marie rode down alone, wondering what exactly she'd just committed to, and whether the money and the purpose and the connection to Brutus were worth the price of belonging to Vincent Castellano's world. Outside, the Chicago winter pressed in cold and sharp, but Marie barely felt it. She was too busy replaying the scene in the hallway, Brutus standing protectively in front of her, Vincent's declaration that she belonged, Sal's hostility, and her own surprising certainty that despite everything, the danger, the violence simmering beneath every interaction, the sense that she was in deeper waters than she'd ever intended, she didn't want to walk away. Not yet. Maybe not ever. 3 weeks had passed since Marie became a regular fixture on the 4th floor. The rhythm of Monday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings had become the scaffolding that held her weeks together. Brutus had transformed under her consistent care. The aggression that had once defined him was now replaced by a calm confidence. He still protected Vincent fiercely, but he'd learned to distinguish between actual threats and simple unfamiliarity. The dog who had once bitten 3 people now greeted most of the organization's members with tail wags instead of growls. The changes in Brutus had not gone unnoticed. Vincent's men had begun treating Marie differently, not with the casual dismissal reserved for hired help, but with a cautious respect usually reserved for people within the inner circle. Tommy at the front desk always had her coffee ready now. Marco checked in with her regularly, asking about her well-being in a way that felt almost paternal. Even the younger crew members nodded acknowledgement when she passed, their hostility replaced by curious acceptance. Only Sal remained openly antagonistic, though he kept his distance, his resentment simmering beneath a veneer of professional courtesy whenever Vincent was present. It was a Friday morning in early December when everything changed. Marie arrived at 7 a.m. as usual, the pre-dawn darkness especially oppressive with storm clouds gathering overhead. She'd heard on the radio that a major winter storm was expected to hit Chicago by evening, the kind that shut down the city, turned highways into parking lots, and left everyone huddled indoors for days. She entered the building, stamping snow from her boots. Tommy wasn't at his usual post, which was unusual. Instead, Marco stood near the entrance with 2 other men Marie recognized as part of Vincent's close security team. All 3 looked tense, their postures alert, their eyes constantly scanning the street outside through the windows. "Marie," Marco said, his voice tight. "Good. Vincent wants to see you immediately. Leave your cart. Just go up." "What's happening?" "Just go. Now." The elevator ride felt longer than usual, her mind racing through possibilities. Had she done something wrong? Had Sal finally convinced Vincent that she was a liability? Had something happened to Brutus? The 4th floor hallway was empty, but she could hear voices coming from Vincent's quarters, multiple people talking over each other, the controlled chaos of crisis management. She knocked once, and the door swung open immediately. Vincent stood in the center of the room, dressed in dark tactical clothing instead of his usual business attire. 5 men surrounded him, all armed, all wearing expressions of grim determination. Brutus sat pressed against Vincent's leg, his body tense but controlled, sensing the urgency in the room. "Marie," Vincent said, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I need you to listen carefully and not ask questions until I'm finished. Can you do that? She nodded, her mouth suddenly dry. There's been a development. Someone from your past has been making inquiries about you, about where you work, where you live, your schedule. We became aware of it 2 days ago through our information network. The person asking questions is... Vincent paused, his expression darkening. James Hartley. Does that name mean anything to you? The world tilted. Marie felt the blood drain from her face, her hands going numb. She hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in 3 years, but it still had the power to make her feel like she was drowning. My ex-husband, she whispered. Sarah's father. Vincent nodded grimly. He was released from prison 4 weeks ago. Parole after serving 3 years of a 6-year sentence for assault. His parole officer has already filed 2 violations, missed check-ins, failed substance tests, but he hasn't been picked up yet, and now he's looking for you. Marie's legs felt weak. She reached out, steadying herself against the back of a chair. James. She'd met him at 19. Married him at 20, and spent 5 years in a relationship that had slowly turned from love to control to violence. She'd finally gotten the courage to leave when she was pregnant with Sarah, had gotten a restraining order, had rebuilt her life carefully, quietly, always looking over her shoulder. He'd violated the restraining order twice, once showing up at her apartment screaming threats, once following her to work. The second time, he'd put his hands on her, and Marie had finally pressed charges. The assault case had taken years to go to trial, but eventually he'd been sentenced. Marie had moved twice during that time, changed her phone number, tried to erase herself from his ability to find her, and now he was out, and he was looking. How did he find me? Marie asked, her voice barely audible. We're not sure yet, but someone gave him information, either deliberately or carelessly. The cleaning service, a former neighbor. We don't know. What we do know is that he was seen 2 blocks from here yesterday afternoon asking about the building, about who works here. I need to leave, Marie said suddenly, panic rising in her chest. I need to disappear. If he finds me here, if he causes trouble for you. No. Vincent's voice was firm, absolute. You're not running, not this time. You don't understand. James is. When he's angry, when he's been drinking or using, he's dangerous. He's unpredictable. He could what? Vincent stepped closer, his presence somehow both intimidating and comforting. Hurt you, threaten you, try to drag you back into a life you escaped? That's not happening, Marie. Not while you're under my protection. This isn't your problem. It became my problem the moment you walked into this building. You work for me. You've earned trust and loyalty here. That means something. It means we protect our own. Vincent gestured to the men surrounding him. These people are the best at what they do. Your ex-husband is a coward who hurts women because he can't face anyone his own size. The moment he steps into my territory, he's going to learn what real consequences look like. Marie wanted to argue, wanted to insist she didn't deserve this kind of protection, that she wasn't worth the trouble, but the words died in her throat because she saw something in Vincent's expression that stopped her. Not pity, not obligation, but genuine anger at the idea of anyone threatening her. What do you need me to do? She asked instead. For today you stay here. The storm's coming anyway, and this building is secure. Marco's team is monitoring the perimeter. If James shows up, we'll handle it. Vincent's jaw tightened. I've also made some calls. Put out word in the right places. If he's smart, he'll hear that you're protected and back off. If he's not smart, he didn't finish the sentence, but the implication hung heavy in the air. One of the men spoke up, someone Marie didn't recognize, older, with silver hair and cold blue eyes. Boss, we could just make this problem disappear permanently. Say the word. No. Vincent's response was immediate and sharp. We do this the right way. Legal channels first. If he violates parole, he goes back to prison. That's how this works. Marco cleared his throat. And if legal channels don't work fast enough, if he comes here before the police pick him up. Vincent was quiet for a moment, his hand dropping to rest on Brutus's head. The dog leaned into the touch, his eyes never leaving Vincent's face. Then we protect what's ours by whatever means necessary. But we try it the right way first. The men nodded, accepting this directive, and began filing out to take their positions. Marco paused at the door. I'll keep you updated. Marie, there's food in the kitchen. Coffee's fresh. Make yourself comfortable. This might be a long day. When they were alone, just Marie, Vincent, and Brutus, the silence felt heavy with unspoken things. Marie sank into the chair she'd been gripping, her hands shaking now that the immediate crisis moment had passed. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I never meant to bring trouble here. I thought I'd been so careful. I thought he'd forgotten about me. Moved on. Men like him don't move on. They obsess. They blame everyone else for their failures. Vincent poured 2 glasses of water from a pitcher on his desk, handed her one. How bad was it when you were with him? Marie took a sip of water, buying time, organizing thoughts she usually kept locked away. It started small, criticism disguised as concern, controlling who I saw, where I went. Then came the accusations that I was cheating, lying, disrespecting him. By the time I realized what was happening, I was isolated from my friends, estranged from my family, financially dependent. She stared at the water glass. The physical violence didn't start until I got pregnant. That's when I knew I had to leave, for Sarah's sake, if not my own. Did he ever hurt your daughter? No, I made sure of that. The one thing I did right was keeping her safe from him. He had supervised visitation for the first few years, but he barely showed up. By the time she was 10, He'd signed away his parental rights in exchange for reduced child support payments. Marie's voice hardened. He never wanted to be a father. He just wanted to own me. And when I took that away from him, when I proved I could survive without him, it destroyed his ego. The assaults, the violations, they were about punishment, about proving he still had power over me. Vincent sat down across from her, his expression thoughtful. You're stronger than you think, Marie. Most people who've been through what you've been through, they stay broken, but you rebuilt. You survived losing your daughter, losing everything, and you kept going. That's not weakness. That's extraordinary strength. I don't feel strong. I feel tired. Strength and exhaustion aren't mutually exclusive. Vincent leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. When my father was dying, in those last weeks, he told me something I didn't understand at the time. He said that real power isn't about dominance or control. It's about knowing when to protect, when to let go, and when to stand firm. He said the strongest people he'd ever known were the ones who'd been broken and chose to rebuild anyway. Your father sounds like he was a good man. He was complicated. This life, Vincent gestured vaguely at the room, the building, the world beyond. It complicates everything, but he had principles. He protected his people, he kept his word, and he taught me that loyalty is earned, not demanded. They sat in companionable silence for a while, the early morning light gradually strengthening outside the windows. Brutus had settled between them, his head resting on Marie's foot, his body warm and solid and comforting. Around 10 a.m., Marco knocked and entered, his expression grave. "Boss, we have a situation. James Hartley just showed up outside. He's demanding to see Marie. Says he knows she works here, that he has a right to talk to his ex-wife." Vincent stood immediately. "How many with him?" "Just him. He's intoxicated. We can smell it from here. Aggressive posture, making threats, attracting attention from people on the street. Call the police. Report an intoxicated individual causing a disturbance. Mention that he's violating parole. Let them handle it." "Already done. They're 10 minutes out." Vincent turned to Marie. "Do you want to see him? You don't have to. You don't owe him anything. But if you want to face him, to show him you're not afraid anymore, I'll be right there with you." Marie's first instinct was to refuse, to hide, to let others handle the confrontation. That's what she'd always done. Avoided, deferred, made herself small to avoid conflict. But something had shifted in the past 3 weeks. Working with Brutus, earning respect in this unlikely place, having people stand up for her instead of expecting her to simply endure, it had awakened something she thought had died with Sarah. "I want to see him," she said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "Not because I owe him anything, but because I need him to see that I'm not the person he thinks I can still control." Vincent nodded, approval flickering in his eyes. "Marco, bring him to the ground floor meeting room. Marie and I will be down in 5 minutes. Full security presence. Make it clear he's on our territory now." Marco left to arrange it. Vincent looked at Marie seriously. "You don't have to say anything to him. You don't have to explain or justify yourself. You can just stand there and let him see that you've moved on, that you're protected, that his power over you is gone. Sometimes that's enough. I know what I want to say. Then say it. And know that the moment he steps out of line, verbally or physically, this ends. He doesn't get to hurt you anymore, Marie. Not with words, not with threats, not with anything." They took the elevator down together, Brutus between them, the dog sensing the tension and responding with alert watchfulness. The meeting room was on the ground floor, a space Marie had cleaned dozens of times but never entered for any other purpose. It was simple. A long table, chairs, fluorescent lighting that made everything look slightly harsh and institutional. James Hartley stood at the far end, flanked by 2 of Vincent's men who looked like they were restraining themselves from physically removing him. He was older than Marie remembered, 42 now, though he looked 50. Prison had not been kind to him. His hair was graying and thinning, his face lined and puffy from years of substance use, his body carrying the weight of someone who'd stopped taking care of himself long ago. But his eyes, those were the same, cold, calculating, filled with barely suppressed rage. When Marie entered with Vincent and Brutus, James's expression cycled through surprise, confusion, and then fury. "Marie," he said, her name coming out like an accusation. "What the hell is this? Who are these people? What are you doing here?" "I work here," Marie said calmly, staying close to Vincent, feeling Brutus's solid presence against her leg. "What are you doing here, James?" "I came to talk to my wife, ex-wife. We've been divorced for 16 years. You know what I mean. I have things to say to you, things you need to hear." "No, I don't. I don't need to hear anything from you. You lost that privilege a long time ago." James's face reddened, his hands clenching into fists. "You think you can just ignore me? After everything, after I did my time, paid my debt? You think you can just move on like I don't exist?" "That's exactly what I think. That's exactly what I'm doing. You took everything from me." James's voice rose, veins standing out on his neck. "My marriage, my daughter, my freedom. You took those things from yourself," Marie said, and her voice was steady, stronger than she'd ever heard it. "You chose violence. You chose to violate the restraining order. You chose to put your hands on me. Every consequence you faced was the result of your own actions, not mine." James lunged forward, and immediately Vincent's men moved, blocking his path. Brutus stood, his body tense, a low warning growl rumbling from his chest. Vincent's hand rested on the dog's head, keeping him controlled but ready. "You need to leave," Vincent said, his voice quiet but carrying absolute authority. Marie doesn't want to talk to you, she's made that clear. The police are on their way. You're violating your parole just by being here, making threats. If you leave now, we won't press additional charges. But if you stay, if you make one more move toward her, I promise you'll regret it. James looked at Vincent for the first time, really looked at him, and something in his expression shifted. He was a bully, a man who'd spent years terrorizing someone smaller and more vulnerable. But Vincent was neither of those things, and the men flanking James were clearly capable of enforcing their boss's will. Who the hell are you? James demanded, but his voice had lost some of its aggressive edge. Someone who protects the people who work for me. Someone who doesn't tolerate men who hurt women. Someone you really don't want to have as an enemy. Vincent's tone never rose, never became aggressive, but the threat was unmistakable. Marie is under my protection. That means if you come near her, if you contact her, if you so much as think about her, you'll answer to me. And trust me when I say that's a conversation you don't want to have. The sound of sirens cut through the moment. 2 police cars pulled up outside, visible through the meeting room windows. Marco appeared in the doorway. Police are here, boss. James looked at Marie one last time, and she forced herself to meet his gaze without flinching. She wanted him to see that she wasn't afraid anymore, that whatever power he'd once held over her was gone, dissolved by years of survival and the unexpected protection of people who valued her strength instead of exploiting her vulnerability. This isn't over, James said, but his words sounded hollow, the desperate threat of someone who knew he'd already lost. Yes, it is, Marie replied. It's been over for 16 years. You just didn't realize it until now. The police entered, and Marco briefed them quickly. Parole violation, trespassing, making threats. James was handcuffed and led out, still shouting accusations and threats that grew fainter as they took him to the patrol car. Marie watched through the window as they drove away, taking with them the last physical remnant of her old life, the last person who'd had the power to make her feel small and afraid. When the room cleared, it was just Marie, Vincent, and Brutus again. Marie's legs suddenly felt weak, and she sat down hard in one of the chairs, adrenaline flooding out of her system and leaving her shaking. You did well, Vincent said, sitting beside her. You stood your ground. You took your power back. I couldn't have done it without you. Without all of this. Marie gestured vaguely at the building, the people, the protection she'd been given. I thought I was just coming here to clean, to earn extra money. I never expected to find a place where you belonged. Marie looked at him, this complicated man who ran an organization she didn't fully understand, whose business dealings existed in shadows she'd been taught not to ask about, but who'd also given her protection when she needed it, who'd trusted her with his dog, who'd seen her strength when she'd forgotten she had any. Yes, she said simply. I never expected to belong anywhere again. Vincent reached over and scratched Brutus behind the ears, his expression thoughtful. I've been thinking about what you said a few weeks ago, about not being able to afford to go back to school, to really work with animals the way you want to. Vincent, I wasn't asking. I know you weren't, but I'm offering anyway. The organization has resources. We have legitimate business ventures that need to show expenses, investments in people. I can structure a scholarship, an educational grant, whatever we need to call it, to make it legal and clean. You'd work here part-time, keep your current responsibilities with Brutus, and go to school for vet tech certification. He held up a hand before she could protest. It's not charity, it's investment. You've proven your value here. With Brutus, with your discretion, with your ability to stand firm under pressure. I invest in people who show that kind of character. Marie felt tears prick her eyes, the first tears she'd allowed herself in months. Why would you do this for me? Because my father was right. The strongest people are the ones who've been broken and chose to rebuild anyway. And because Vincent paused, his expression softening in a way Marie had never seen. Because sometimes we all need someone to believe in us when we've forgotten how to believe in ourselves. You did that for Brutus. Let me do it for you. The offer hung in the air between them, enormous in its implications. It wasn't just about school or money. It was about a future, about possibility, about the chance to become something more than just someone who survived. I don't know what to say, Marie whispered. Say yes, then say thank you, then get back to work. Because that dog needs his afternoon training session, and you're the only person he'll actually listen to. Marie laughed through her tears, and Brutus, sensing the emotional shift, pressed his wrinkled face against her hand, his tail wagging slowly. Yes, thank you, and you're right, we have work to do. Over the next few months, Marie's life transformed in ways she'd never imagined possible. James was returned to prison for parole violations. His sentence extended. The restraining order was renewed and strengthened. Marie enrolled in an accelerated vet tech program at a community college, her tuition covered by an educational grant from one of Vincent's legitimate business entities. She continued working with Brutus, whose temperament had become so reliable that Vincent had started bringing him to more meetings, the dog's calm presence somehow diffusing tensions that might otherwise escalate. Marie moved out of her tiny studio in Pilsen and into a modest but comfortable one-bedroom apartment in a safer neighborhood. She kept Sarah's drawings, her daughter's favorite books, the memories that mattered, but she also began filling the space with new things, new hopes, a new life built on the foundation of survival but reaching towards something more. The men in Vincent's organization had fully accepted her presence. She'd become a fixture, someone who moved between worlds, the legitimate and the shadowed, the dangerous and the domestic. She cleaned and trained Brutus and studied her textbooks in Vincent's office during quiet moments, her presence somehow making the space feel less like a fortress and more like a place where people actually lived. Sal had eventually left the organization, his constant opposition to Vincent's changing philosophy making his position untenable. Others had risen to take his place, people who understood that strength could coexist with principle, that protection didn't require cruelty, that loyalty was built on mutual respect rather than fear. One spring morning, nearly 6 months after the confrontation with James, Marie arrived for her regular session to find Vincent sitting on the floor of his office. Brutus sprawled across his lap, both of them looking remarkably peaceful. "He's gotten lazy," Vincent said without preamble. "You've spoiled him. He's comfortable. That's different from lazy." Marie set down her bag and joined them on the floor, Brutus immediately wiggling free from Vincent to press against her, his entire body wagging with joy. "Besides, he's earned the right to be comfortable. He's a good boy. You're graduating next month," Vincent said, watching her with Brutus. "Top of your class, I hear. The instructors say I have a natural gift. Years of cleaning kennels apparently provides excellent practical experience. What are you going to do after graduation?" Marie had been thinking about this question for weeks. Dr. Patterson had reached out, offering her a position at the clinic where she'd first learned to work with animals. It was a good offer, fair pay, full benefits, the kind of opportunity she would have jumped at a year ago. But something had changed. She'd found something here, in this unlikely place, among these unlikely people. Purpose, yes, but also belonging, also family, in the strange way that families could form in unexpected circumstances. "I thought I might stay," Marie said carefully. "Keep working with Brutus. Maybe expand to help with other animals. I know some of your businesses involve legitimate pet-related ventures, and I could still clean because honestly, there's something meditative about it. But also," she paused, meeting Vincent's gaze directly, "also because I don't want to leave. Because this place, these people, you all gave me back something I thought I'd lost. Hope, purpose, a reason to wake up in the morning beyond just survival." Vincent was quiet for a long moment, his hand absently stroking Brutus's head. "My father used to say that the best organizations were built on people who chose to stay, not people who felt trapped. I'm glad you're choosing to stay, Marie." "Me too." Outside the windows, Chicago was blooming into spring. Trees unfurling green leaves, flowers pushing up through the soil, the city shaking off winter's grip and reaching toward warmth and light. Marie looked out at the view, remembering the frozen November morning when she'd first walked through these doors, terrified and desperate and just trying to survive. She was still that person, in some ways. The grief over Sarah would never fully leave. The scars from James would always be part of her history. But she was also someone new, someone who'd learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the choice to keep moving forward despite it. Someone who'd discovered that strength could be quiet, that power could be protective rather than destructive, that belonging could be found in the most unexpected places. "Come on, boy," Marie said, standing and stretching. "Let's go for a walk. Spring mornings are too beautiful to waste." Brutus jumped up immediately, his tail wagging, ready for whatever adventure came next. Vincent stood too, grabbing his jacket from the back of his chair. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. "I'd like that," Marie replied, and meant it. They walked out together, woman, man, and dog, into the spring morning, into a future that held possibility and hope and the hard-won peace that came from facing the darkness and choosing, every day, to keep moving toward the light. Behind them, the building stood solid and unchanging, a place where rules were different but loyalty was absolute, where people found second chances and rebuilt broken lives and learned that courage wasn't about never being afraid. It was about being afraid and choosing to stand firm anyway, and in the end, that made all the difference.